Hollywood legend Howie Hubberman. How you doing, Howie? We were talking originally how just a little bit of our Hollywood history, man. When I got there, I was thinking that block Guitars R Us was on. That's a whole epicenter in itself with El Compadre,
Oh
that
yeah.
the Sunset Grill. Crazy, right?
Well, remember, for most of my life, or at least my rock and roll life, I was on Sunset, two doors down from El Compadres,
Yes,
and right
yes.
across from the Sunset Grill. In fact, many times I was at the Sunset Grill with Don Henley
And that old
or
guy
Tom
was
Petty
there.
or Slash or CC or Brett. I used to take everyone there for hamburgers that couldn't afford it. But every once in a while, we would run into Don Henley or Tom Petty or even Tom Verlaine, people that
Yeah.
could kind of afford it. So it
It was a cool,
was
and
pretty
there
fun.
was a man there from the old world. He really was there, and he would punch
Oh
him all
yeah,
the,
Joe. Joe, I
yeah.
know all of Joe's kids. Yeah. So
And there was that sign for the Sunset Grill next to the payphone, and there's just pictures of Izzy, everybody using that payphone, man, over the
oh
years.
yeah. No, that was back in the day. That was the heyday of Hollywood rock and roll, basically. The mid 80s to the late 80s was the heyday of Hollywood rock and roll. So
And when did you get there, and how did you get there?
I came here to originally work for Van Halen in late 1978. A guy brought me down that was attached to Jackson Charvel guitars, and I got up on stage after the first album with Michael, the bass player, and we talked about me going full time with him, et cetera, et cetera. And the job offer I remembered was $150, and I was coming out of New York, and I had a very successful guitar shop in New York already, and I came out here, and immediately I was selling vintage guitars to the A-listers, like almost immediately. And I said, you know what? I don't want to make $150 a week. I got to turn it down. And now that I look back, because I never thought I was going to go into management at that time. Tom Peterson from Cheap Trick dragged me into management at that time. But if I look back, I said, you know what? What would have happened if I had that learning curve from going on board with Van Halen at that time and maybe partnering up with the management company or at least doing it on my own and learning? I would have been farther ahead. So sometimes you got to think about the money and think about your career and
Yeah,
make the right choices. That probably was not the exact right choice. Things turned out,
right.
but it might have been a lot different if I took that goofy little job with Van Halen. So,
But at the same point, like I said, I was back east, and I would see three names on albums. It was you, Kim Fowley, Vicky Hamilton, and I felt like you see people that run many successful presidential campaigns, not just one, but you have the part to do with the Poison. First Poison, who changes the world. That's a big record that changes a lot of things.
it's a $15,000 record that went on to sell almost 7 million copies.
You know what, I crack up because Tom Wally almost did some of my band Blackboard Jungle. That now he's in charge of the Tupac estate, and
Yeah.
it started with Poison.
No, Tom is a great guy. Tom came out to the country club and couldn't get in because we were sold out for a Poison show. And he comes up to me. I'm at the front door because I'm running the country club with a girl named Nellie Alon, who was Whoa Nellie, and now she's Nellie Nebben. And incidentally, as we speak, she's my partner on a lot of management stuff. She's in Japan right now with Earth, Wind, and Fire.
Oh
But
wow! I
we have
remember
a
her on all
show.
the flyers, all the tough Whoa Nelly
Oh yeah,
Productions.
yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
So long story short is Tom looked at me. He goes, "Look, I want to sign Poison directly with Capitol. I want to go ahead and get this off of Enigma. We'll have to partner up, but let's get together with your lawyer." And at the time it was Peter Paterno. And Tom knew Peter, goes, "Let's do this." And I remember all the deal points, and we did it pretty quickly. And we saved the project from being shelved at probably 500,000 copies. And it went on at that point to almost 5 million. Now it's just sitting under 7 million for Look What the Cat Dragged In.
And you were managing them at that point, right?
I was managing them through that album. I
Yeah.
left probably officially in early 89, but then they dragged me back on board with HK Management, getting them off of Sanctuary. And that's kind of a story I can't tell,
Right.
but anybody that's involved knows the story. And I was kind of semi involved with it, where I was a straw dog as far as not letting them leave my management. And they wound up with HK, and HK did a really good job with them.
Okay. Now, when you were managing them, they went on tour. Were you managing when they went on the Rat tour and everything?
I was still officially their manager on the Rat tour and the David Lee Roth tour.
Okay.
We were out with Cinderella, and believe it or not, the headliner with Cinderella was Loudness from Japan.
Wow.
And I was on that tour. I also went on the Quiet Riot tour with them. Um, my biggest point of leaving it was not so much that we needed to part ways, but I was having trouble with my marriage. And I thought the only way to save my marriage was to go ahead and step down as gracefully as possible, but still keep whatever percentage I could keep. And I wound up doing it successfully.
So that's cool. I was thinking of you when I just saw the stadium tour, like that guys like you know, just such a part of this machine. And one thing that gets overlooked is I think that Cry Tough video to the kids, that was at the Palace was the big video.
I did that video. I hooked it up at the Palace.
We did it wire to wire down there. Tell us about that day.
That's a real crowd there. They let people in for real. I don't know if they charged it at the door or not. I don't know, but we had about 1,200 people. That's all we could fit in there. That was it. And that was all a really live shot situation. They did a nice live video. That was a good video.
So. It was the essence of the band. And how were they excited to be making their first video? Were you excited to like MTV?
I was very excited. And when Tom Wally called me up and he goes, "What do you think the single should be now?" And I said, "Well, it's Talk Dirty to Me for sure." And he goes, "Just my thoughts exactly. I wanted to hear it from a couple more people." And they did the video for Talk Dirty to Me.
Wow, man.
I think Talk Dirty to Me was one of the top videos for that period on MTV for sure.
Oh, yeah, it changed everything, especially being a kid into rock and roll. And do you still have the store at this point? Are you still running the store at this point?
No, the store, I kind of sold out to Albert Molinaro, who's at that point, my junior partner, and he sold out to Sam Ash. Okay. Sam Ash wanted to be on Sunset so badly, they bought that store and made it a warehouse. And then they got a building.
Lost you for a second.
So guitars, I've got A-listers coming on. How I met most of my A-listers is through doing vintage guitars.
Okay. Wow. I lost you visually for a second. Oh, there you are. Wow. And
if it's me or...
I think it's you. I'm gonna pause. So you had the store. Was Guns rehearsing behind there when you had the store? Were they rehearsing?
Guns N' Roses were rehearsing across the street, kind of behind Guitar Center.
Wow. So it was that side of the street behind
across the street. They'd come over to my store, borrow stuff, walk across the street. They were always good with returning stuff and whatever. They were 100%, which is more than I can say for a lot of bands that I was hoping.
Wow. So. And you knew something special was good. Did you ever go over to that infamous rehearsal place over there?
Oh yeah. I went over there a couple times when they had problems with the police a couple times and some other stuff. But oh no, the writing was on the wall. That band was going to go somewhere. Listen, a lot of people that saw Poison didn't understand Poison. They saw the fluffiness, they saw this and they saw that, but they didn't see the real band that Poison was. If you were behind the scene, you would know that it was a real project. And those guys, and there were kids back then, they worked their butts off. They really did.
Yeah.
Guns N' Roses, not so much. But the thing with Guns N' Roses, they were a real rock. They had some great songs. They wrote from the heart. They didn't write for anybody but themselves. Yeah. And it shined through. A year and a half later, it shined through. So
were you part of Slash? Because you see a lot of pictures of him early on with the Jacksons and the BC Riches. Then he basically reinvents the Les Paul. Were you part of that? What was that about?
He traded that Jackson guitar into me. I got him two Mac guitars that first formed, that Hunter Burst it was called.
Okay.
And incidentally, Max, the guitar builder, he stays when it comes to LA too. We're still all about, is it on your end or my end?
Wow. Now let's talk about the Izzy guitar, the white one that he played at the Ritz. And what's the story going on with
the Izzy guitar? Was a guitar. Now there's two different stories. One is that Gibson gave it to him. And I don't think so. I think we let him borrow that from the wall. Okay. And after those shows, instead of paying for it, he returned it. towards some other stuff he owed us for. A guy came into the shop. He says, I hear you got this guitar. How much is it? I think we sold it to him for like $600 or $700. And he sold it, or a concern sold it at auction recently. And I guess it sold for 60 or 70,000, somewhere around there.
Wow.
But I gave a letter of approval on it and everything else. It's kind of cool.
Why wouldn't Izzy buy it? Why do you think he wouldn't buy it? Just
the same reason why recently Slash would not buy the Hunter Burst back. We got the Hunter Burst in front of him and he didn't buy it back. We don't understand that, but
yeah,
it is what it is.
Principle thing. Wow.
I sold him the Hunter Burst, by the way, for $600.
Okay.
And we sold it recently for $125,000.
Right.
And if it were to go on the market now, it would be right at that probably 200,000 figure right now.
That's crazy.
It is amazing. So, but it's Slash. He's amazing.
Oh, I asked one time my buddy from Yamaha, I said, who would walk in this building and cause the greatest? He goes, Slash. He would outdo Jimmy Page. He is. That's what I mean. Does it ever hit you? I mean, the world changed. I mean, you were there changing the world, and you were part of a team that was needed because those bands needed you.
This is how much the world changed. Speaking about Slash, when I was working with Vicky, now remember, Vicky was the manager. I was never the manager of Guns N' Roses.
Right.
I invested the money in Vicky, and she managed Guns N' Roses. She called the shots. I just provided equipment, gave them some money, whatever, got them a place to stay by the whiskey, where they almost all stayed, including, I don't know if you remember Jennifer Perry. Do you remember Jennifer? Jennifer Perry even stayed there.
Wow.
So when I called Gibson, because I had a little clout back then, and said, look, I want to get like a partial endorsement on Gibson Les Pauls for this hot young guitar player with Guns N' Roses. His name is Slash. They said, we're not interested. I said, come on, man. You're talking to Howie Hubberman, man. I'm the one that all the hot guitar players come to over here. He's going to be one of the men. Because we're just not interested, Howie. We love you. You need anything? He wants to send you some parts. I go, no, I want you to help me out with Slash. They wouldn't. Now, over the last decade, Slash is the #1 Gibson endorsee, just underneath Les Paul himself.
Incredible.
Pretty crazy.
Yeah.
But I'm happy to be part of it, and I'm happy they recognize him now, and I'm happy he got the recognition he deserves. So,
what did those days feel like when you were? Because I remember it just felt like hot in El Compadre and your store, and I wasn't there when the rehearsal room was back there. What was that like? Them all living there, coming by your place. What was it?
On any given day at Guitars R Us, and this is like in 1 week, we would have Bruce Springsteen come in there, buy a special guitar in the back room. People would come in and look at him and say, did anybody ever tell you look a lot like Bruce Springsteen, but you're a lot bigger than Bruce? Because I know Bruce is a little guy. And then we go up to the front where Bruce writes us a check, and on top of the check it says Bruce Springsteen. Guy turns white and walks out of the place, walks back a half hour later, goes, I've never been so embarrassed in my life. In the same week, we'd have like Chrissy Hine would come in there with a guy named John McEnroe. John McEnroe is a left-handed tennis player, very famous tennis. They used to hang out with each other, and she would buy him his first guitar, a left-handed Telecaster. We sold it to him. I mean, it just goes on and on. At one time, Martha Quinn walked into my store. There was a part of my life where I lost a little over 100 pounds in 3 months after I got off the road with Poison because I needed to lose weight. I was huge. Remember, I'm not a tall guy. I'm like 5'8". I say 5'9", but I'm 5'8" now. I'm 67, so I think I've lost at least a half inch, including my height. No. So anyways, Martha Quinn comes in and buys a guitar for a guy named Jordan. He was in a band called the Fuzz Tones. I don't remember the Fuzz Tones.
Yeah, the 60s
she's married,
retro. Yeah.
She's married to him, but she winds up buying a guitar for him. And I look at her and go, do you ever get that you look a lot like Martha Quinn? She goes, oh, really? Do you know Martha Quinn? And I go, yeah, just a couple months ago, I was in New York City with Poison doing MTV. She goes, oh my God, Howie Hubberman, I recognize your voice. What's different about you? I go, well, I'm 100 pounds lighter.
Oh, wow.
And I actually took her out that week to Spice. Do you remember Spice?
Yeah, yeah, on Hollywood
We
Boulevard at the
went to
end. Yeah.
Spice to see Sam Kinison, uh, Billy Idol, whoever was. I had carte blanche at Spice because of who was running it. They were friends of mine.
Yeah.
So I used to go there a lot, especially when they had something cool happening. And I took her out. We had a lot of, she's a great gal. She really is. She was already engaged to Jordan at that time, but I had fun meeting her down there and, hanging with her for the night. That was cool.
That's
So
cool, man. And wow. And let's talk about, because I was very moved on the East Coast by Tough. Tough had a big impact on the LA scene. And
Tough came
Stevie,
down there, another really hardworking band.
you managed
Stevie
them, right?
Rochelle, possibly harder working than any other musician I've ever worked with.
Wow.
And he got them to the point where they got a record. By the way, by the time they got a record deal, I was no longer with them because I was busy with the Zeros, and then I was busy with Nitro.
Right.
Nitro had a little bit of a heyday where I thought they were going to break through, and I had to provide my time for them for sure. But I always remained friends with everyone from Tough, especially Stevie. Stevie and I
Such a
are
good
still
guy.
pretty close. I talk to Stevie every couple of weeks now. I talk to him. He's a great guy. He's just a great guy. And his kid is now taller than him. His kid is about 6'4" now.
It's crazy.
So,
yeah.
I remember when his kid was born, he, it was like, seems like yesterday, but now I guess he's 17 years old, 18 years old, maybe even.
And one of his kids is going to school up here in Berkeley by me. It's crazy.
His son?
I think his daughter is
his daughter, maybe. Yeah.
Yeah.
His son is big, tall kid.
Yeah.
Looks a little like Stevie, but not exactly like Stevie.
A little more skaterish.
Yeah. But Stevie's a good looking kid. I mean, Stevie really, unfortunately, there was predecessors to Stevie that cut the mold that was hard for Stevie not to fall into.
Yeah.
And he did. And in some ways it worked to his advantage. And in some ways it worked to his disadvantage, one way or the other. But he was there. He was there during that time period. So.
Yeah. And the Zeros that you're still tight with. I remember, did you get that purple? Remember they drive around in that purple?
I put up the money for a 1966. It was a Malibu station wagon. We painted it plum crazy purple because when I was a kid, I had a couple cars, Mopar cars, that were that plum crazy purple. And when he said it, it was, I think for $2,000, we owned the car and the paint job. So,
oh my God. It was my vision of LA. I knew your name. You have this guitar store. The purple one would drive alongside. Then you'd see Dennis Woodruff and his actor.
Yes.
I don't mean to call him crazy, but it was off.
Oh, he's crazy.
And he would be down there. And it was just this scene of what's going on down here. This is just otherworldly.
Now it's funny because when he painted that car purple, if you see a lot of the cartoon characters of the Zeros,
yeah,
that's all done by a guy named Butch Lukic, who went on to win many, many awards. He was the animator for the Batman series.
Oh, wow.
And he won all the Emmys, all the awards you could win. He's a big, big player in Hollywood, a great guy too. I saw Butch less than 6 months ago. We went out to lunch with Sammy. And he actually sold his house in Burbank. He moved out of LA, a little bit out of LA. But we still keep in touch. And Sammy for sure keeps in touch. And we had a lot of talent that was involved with the Zeros, a lot.
Yeah.
So.
Oh, yeah. You probably remember on the East Coast before coming out of here, HOWARDSTERA.
Yeah, we talked about that today even. Yeah. That was something. So,
what are you up to now? You working on music? What do you
doing? I work a little bit piecemeal. I do stuff for certain labels. I manage Norman Brown with Nellie Nebben. Norman Brown is a huge smooth jazz guy. I've done a lot of sound exchange deals, most of them with a guy named Mark Ferrari, who used to be in a band.
Mark Ferrari.
Sweat, and a lot of different bands. He's a great guy, good businessman. I've done a lot of sound exchange buyouts for a lot of the top smooth jazz artists. I work very closely with Paul Brown. Now, Paul Brown is the biggest smooth jazz guy production-wise, and he's had like 76 number one smooth jazz hits, either as an artist, producer, or writer. And I see him all the time. He's one of my best friends. And I'm still having a lot of fun in the music business.
That's awesome.
I'm not retiring.
Oh,
I'm
love it. I always see you're doing, it's great. And I wanted to ask you, I was talking with a friend of mine. What do you think? Because you dealt in vintage guitars. Do you think some guys slaved to it so much? If Hendrix was alive now, what would he be reaching for? If he was born, because he was born in '69 and he reached for a '69 Strat. If he was alive now, being as adventurous as he was, what do you think he'd be
No
reaching for?
question in my mind, he'd be playing Stratocasters exactly
Okay.
the way he plays, upside down. So
Okay.
now remember, I worked a lot with Dick Dale not that long ago,
Oh,
before he passed away, and he played a left-handed Stratocaster strung upside down, not a right-handed one. So he was kind of like the carbon copy of Jimi Hendrix.
wow.
And there's another great guitar player of his time and great innovator too.
Oh,
So
yeah.
shout out to Dick Dale, man. I love him. His personality was as big as the world. Believe me.
You know, I wanted to ask you a question about that GNR rehearsal. I've always heard there was no PA in there. What was the PA situation in the original
They,
GNR?
they had a couple bottoms in there, and they might have had a couple guitar heads. It was very, very minimal. Very minimal.
So it was as bad as they said with
Yeah,
Axel
and remember,
singing.
they all kind of stayed there too.
Yeah, yeah, they lived there. I came right after that, but yeah, wow.
Now, when the band moved down the street, by the right next door to the whiskey, actually across the street, the little street from the whiskey,
Clark.
uh,
Yeah.
it was all of them, except for Slash and Vicky Hamilton, Jennifer Perry, and one other girl was there too. And it was pretty crowded.
Yeah,
Not
yeah. Wow. And
at
just
times I used to have to close my shop, drive down the street because I was the only one with the shop, so I had to close the door, travel down there and break things up between Axel and Steven.
wow.
And there's a couple of things online that tell you what
Yeah,
happened with that. But
yeah,
by the time I got down there, they solved everything. It was miraculous. They didn't want to get involved in a shouting war with me. But
yeah.
back then, they know if there was a shouting war, maybe I'd pull the plug on the money, which I wouldn't. But the thing is, they always thought in the back of mind I could at any time. I never did, and I never would have. I mean, Vicky back then was my partner. Vicky sold me the rights to Poison at the time for $4,000. Just want to
Oh
let you know.
my God. Wow.
And they were stagnant for just a short period of time, and then we took them to the top of the top at the country club coming out of the Troubadour, and we had 12 sold out shows in a row at the country club, and that's what got Tom Wally and the world paying attention to him. And then when we brought it into the Palace and other places, all the A-listers in metal started coming out. Billy Sheehan. I remember Steve Vai coming out there to see the band. So
Wow. I think they were the winners on the stadium tour. I just went. I think they were the winners. And I've
that's
seen
what
them.
everyone says between them and Def Leppard. Definitely.
I've seen
Uh,
some slumps with Poison even a few years ago, but I go, I think they won. And Leopard was great, but it's what, you know what I mean? They've been doing for a zillion years. They just lit it up when they came out here. It was just something that Van Halen element that Brett continues.
well, the original deal with the members of Poison, and I'm gonna state this. One of the reasons why Poison stayed together and had the longevity they had. Remember, CC did leave the band for a
Oh
little
yeah,
while,
Richie Kotzen, yeah.
and he came back. But one of the reasons for the longevity is I insisted on each member 25, 25, 25, 25. That kept them together.
Wow. It's
And
so
I
smart.
was very necessary. They all had a meaning in that band. Every one. The hardest working guy originally, Bobby Dow.
Wow.
The one that corralled all the girls, or the two of them, Ricky and Brett. CC was a lunatic, and people loved his personality. And he probably to this day is still one of the most underrated guitar players in the business. Now, I'm
Yeah.
not saying he's the best guitar player in the world, but he's very underrated. He is a good guitar player, a very talented guy, and he writes good stuff. I mean, he's talented.
Oh God, yes. Yeah, yeah. And he brought Talk Dirty to me. Do you remember the Love Razors and Sten? I don't know if you know Sten from the Love Razors.
Oh, very well. Yes, I do. Yeah.
Sten told me CC brought that riff into his band when he was playing with Sten, and Sten was like, "Dude,
Yeah.
it sounds like Cheap Trick. That song sucks."
Yeah. Yeah.
Isn't that crazy?
It happens all the time. I brought some I don't want to say it. I brought some original demo tapes from a very famous A&R guy right now who's with a big label. and I don't want to mention the name of the band, but the band went on to sell 40 million copies. Okay. And it wasn't Poison, it's another band.
Right.
So,
wow. Wow.
it's crazy.
God. Well, thank you for your time, and this has been so great. We should
I
do this
appreciate,
again.
listen, anything that keeps rock and roll, as I know it, alive. Remember, I'm a product of the 60s and 70s, but because I lived the 80s, this is always going to be my roots. I probably know more about 80s rock than maybe anybody else because just the different genres and situations I've been involved with more than anybody else. And I appreciate you, your show, your podcast, and bringing myself on and other people like myself, keeping it alive and keeping the memories alive. It means yeah, that means a lot to me.
That's why we're here.
Go today.
Oh, I love it. It's my favorite place on earth, man.
It means a lot to me. You know, Mario, you know, bless his soul. Miguel, the original, you know, cookback. Yeah. Man, we would play cards there at 4:00 in the morning. And we had a lot of fun. And, you know, Mario and I were very close. I don't know if anybody realized how close we were. I'm one of the only people that had a tab at the Rainbow because of Poison and Guns and Vicky and everything else. And whenever they were short, I'd come in and he'd look at me and I would go, okay, how much do I owe?
Wow.
And he was a gentleman about it, 100%.
Oh, you're a legend. The whole time I was there, I'm finally there's certain people
we're
in Hollywood.
We're all legends as long as we're here on this earth. And then when we pass on, we live it. Like you mentioned Kim Fowley. I don't know Kim that well, but to me, Kim's a legend.
Oh, God. You know, I got chills because I just sat in a stadium hearing Cherry Bombs and Joan Jett, who's probably named by Kim, sing his words. And as that song, I go, that's just Kim. Can't stay at home. Hello, daddy. Hello. It's Kim talking. A stadium of kids.
Speaking about Kim Fowley, I know a lot of stories because Lita Ford stayed at one of my houses with Jim when she was pregnant with her first child, James, who's now 6'4". So long story short is they stayed at my house for about 4 or 5 months. Okay. And we actually did a partial album together with Jim Gillette singing, if you can believe that.
That's crazy.
And that was a lot of fun. You know, I didn't know Lita that well before then. I got to know Lita very well.
So you probably heard the Kim stories and you know what I mean?
And Jim Gillette and Steve Rochelle are very close.
Yes. Yes. I love that Stevie and he was the original singer of Tough or something like that. Someone was a singer.
Jim Gillette was the original singer of Tough out of Phoenix. Yes. Yeah.
Stevie's just a great dude. I love, and he's fun, man. I always say Stevie can take it. He can dish it out and he can take it. I mean, he's such a good dude, man.
Whenever I go out with Stevie and I tell him a story like I've told you or stuff like that, he eats it up. Sometimes it gets in Metal Sludge, sometimes it doesn't. But he's always interested in hearing about what went on in his time and a couple years before his time.
Oh, it's so good. It's so good. Well,
two of music. So.
Yeah. Well, we'll have to do a part 2. Hang out so I can say goodbye, and we're gonna have you back because this was great, man. Howie, thanks so much.
Britt, thank you very much for having me. Do this for years and years. Maybe grow with this too and get something else going on with this. I think people need to hear what you hear.
Yes. I lost you there for a second.
As we're frozen up again. Okay, now we're unfreezing.
What were you saying you think people need to hear? What were you saying?
People need to hear the message you're bringing with the people and artists that you got coming on board from this period of music that was the last real period of rock and roll that
we've had Paul Black, everybody, all you know, there was a scene that we need.
Paul Black, a legend,
big part of that machine. So I really enjoy having the pieces of this machine on, and we're gonna have you back, dude. It was so great. This was great.
Let's keep in touch. Don't be such a stranger. Don't take 25 years to get a hold of me next time.
All right, and hang out so I can say goodbye.
You got it.